everybody, this is Lucy Nathanson, child therapist and founder of ConfidentChildren.co.uk. I'm really excited that today I'm actually interviewing a parent of a child with selective mutism. This is Maria, and we've worked together in the past, so I'm really excited that Maria will actually be sharing her story with you today. Before we get going, for those of you who don't know, selective mutism is an anxiety disorder whereby a child can talk freely in some situations, such as home, but they're unable to talk in other situations, such as school, or with extended family, or in public. So I first met Maria 4 years ago now. Wow. So it was 2015.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And Maria's daughter was actually 4 at the time. Mm-hmm. She was in reception and she was non-verbal at school, completely non-verbal, so unable to talk to adults or children at school. And we met at the Smira conference in 2015.
Correct.
So I was talking at the conference and Maria actually contacted me after I spoke and asked me whether I can work with her daughter. And that's how our journey started, really. Yeah. And now her daughter is 8 years old and she's fully verbal at school. She's able to take part in school completely.
Completely normal.
So yeah, I just thought it would be an amazing opportunity for us to discuss the journey of being a parent of a child with selective mutism, because of course Maria has experienced it from the very beginning, where her child was unable to talk to anyone at school, to now being fully verbal. And I thought it would be really useful for parents to hear from a fellow parent. So let's get going then. Before we get going though, let me just mention that of course this is Maria's unique experience and every single situation will be very different. So if you're watching this, please take what resonates for you. And of course, your situation will be different to Maria's situation. Every situation is different.
Definitely.
So firstly, Maria, when did you first realise that your daughter had selective mutism?
Well, I think she was probably 3 years old. She was at nursery. I'm from Spain, and she was born in Spain. And when she was 2 years old, we moved to London. Even by then, at 2, she was completely verbal, so there was no speech development delay at all. She was speaking Spanish, which was the mother tongue when we moved here, but probably after 6 months to a year of living in London, she was fully fluent in English as well. So at home, she was freely speaking in both Spanish and English, and we realized that she was not being verbal outside of home when she was probably about 3.5. Actually, I think she had been attending nursery for almost a year and a half.
Really?
Before we realized, it was.
Wow. And is that because the staff didn't tell you, or?
Well, they didn't tell me. They didn't think that there was anything to really worry about. She was obviously still a toddler. Not all children speak or start speaking at the same age. Mm-hmm. Probably, obviously, they didn't know how much she spoke at home. The fact that we were bilingual and that we had moved to London recently, so they thought that also was a little bit of a sort of language learning development. So I think it took them a while, and it took me also a while to realize that she was not talking, because when she was with me, she was talking.
Yeah, of course.
So I actually started realizing when we were more in like social situations, out and about with friends, or even whenever we went back to Spain and we were with my family, that I sort of started noticing, well, she's not talking, so I remember that at first it was like, well, probably, she's a bit shy, or, she doesn't know them that well, or, but it just got to a point that I was like, no, but she's not talking. And the moment that there was a little bit of a break in that social situation with me or with her sister, she would talk a lot. So I remember approaching the school, and it was heartbreaking when I said to them, is doing okay? Is she asking for things? They said, she's never ever spoken a word to
Wow.
us.
So that was
like,
so she was 3 years old when
she was 3
when you first realised. Wow. And like you say, she could speak English and Spanish.
Yeah.
So it was a bilingual family, and she was fluent at this stage in both languages.
In both languages.
So in what situations and with whom was your child able and unable to talk?
So she was perfectly able to talk at home with her sister, with myself, with her dad. We had an au pair at the time living with us, so with her au pair. I think that was about it. Then I think she spoke to a couple of friends at nursery. Probably not at nursery
On play dates at home.
but on play dates at home. After a little bit, she would speak to them, start talking to them. But I think that was about it. And then she was not able to speak to anybody, any other children or any adults at nursery. And also she was not able to speak to even close family members and friends in social situations.
So grandparents she couldn't talk to at the time?
Not really, no.
An extended family. And of course she couldn't talk to the teachers at nursery and then at reception.
Yeah, she would not talk to anybody.
And she wouldn't talk to friends in those situations either. So
yeah.
Okay, so how did selective mutism affect your daughter and yours and your family life?
So I think she was she was just not being herself, whenever she was outside of her cocoon environment. It was really sad. It was really sad to see her not being able to speak and to socialize in a way that I knew she could.
Yeah.
And I think it affected us because obviously it was such an uncomfortable situation that almost like I wanted to avoid meeting people or having friends around or us going to meet friends, because I knew it was such a barrier to overcome, like, oh well, she's not gonna talk and she's gonna get all anxious and pull her. That's sort of reactions at the beginning we used to have. So it did affect our life socially, but more importantly it just affected the way that she enjoyed life and the way that she couldn't really make as many friends as she would have. And even though she was always happy, that was the other thing that probably delayed us realizing that there was a problem at nursery, because she was pretty much always happy to go to nursery. She did have a good time. She loved playing and as I mentioned, she even made a couple of friends, but deep down she was not being herself. She was not really enjoying her life.
Sure.
So
and I think this is another way that perhaps might differ with people who might be watching this, because some children with selective mutism, they're happy at school but they're just non-verbal, whereas other children, they are showing other signs of anxiety and they'll be unable to engage or even play. But your daughter was able to play, but she was not talking with anyone.
That's correct. So she was able to play. I think generally she had a good time, but of course there were always activities and moments where she would struggle.
Of course.
Whether it was like singing in front of the parents, or whether it was reading with the nursery staff, or whether it was joining in any verbal activities or games. She would just like retrieve herself and be the child who doesn't speak.
Sure. Yeah. And what about in public, like if when you were in the supermarket or in the park, if someone asked her a question, would that increase her anxiety levels?
Yes, I think generally it would. She would just obviously not talk, but also she didn't enjoy certain activities or certain social situations in a way that other children would. So, going to a friend's house was always a little bit of like a challenge for her, especially if, people, as people do, then start asking her questions, like, so how are you, and what's your favorite color, and what school did you go to, and what's the name of your teacher? And she was like,
yeah, of course,
please leave me alone. So obviously any social situation becomes a little bit of a struggle.
Sure, yeah, okay. So tell us about your journey once you realised that your daughter had selective mutism. What were your next steps? What was the process for you to actually access help?
Right. So when we realised that there was a problem, the first thing that we needed to do was to get some sort of like professional diagnosis of okay, what the problem is and exactly what is it selective mutism. I mean, I think the first time that I heard those words were mentioned by the nursery staff of the time, and I think how we went about this was first we contacted the GP, and I told her about what we were experiencing. We were referred to a health visitor, but she was still pretty much like under 5, so she was toddler. So the health visitor, I remember, came home and did an interview with her dad and myself, and she referred us to a speech and language therapist belonging to the council, I think, and then she got assessed, and it was confirmed that she was selective muted. And in parallel of that speech and language therapist assessment, the GP referred us to development pediatrician,
right,
just to see whether there was anything else going on. I remember having that assessment with the pediatrician, and she was great. She, explored, assessed her, and made her play, and she confirmed that it was a case of selective mutism, but also she sort of ruled out any other diagnosis. So yeah, that's pretty much what happened with the diagnose sort of like process.
Lots of professionals involved, the school, the
yes.
GP, paediatrician,
yes.
psychologist,
yeah.
and speech and language therapist.
Yeah, there were lots of professionals involved in sort of like in a parallel way, sort of like getting people from one place to another and getting, professionals involved. Obviously being initiated, the initiative was mine, but I was just like pulling different strings.
Yeah, I guess to figure out who is the right person.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to know because, the GP goes one way, the nursery tries the best going this way. And then, we were lucky enough that where we lived at the time, there was already a path for selective mutism, and it was actually falling under speech and language department within the NHS. So I think we were quite lucky to find that. What happened after that is that I think the speech and language therapist that assessed her, she visited the nursery staff, and I think that was very helpful because she immediately gave them some basic guidance as to what to do and what not to do, which I think at the time was really helpful because I remember at first, nursery staff didn't really know how to react to it. So they went, we were trying a few different techniques, and even including like bribery, showing something to her, like, do you really like this book? And then putting it up on the shelf and saying, when you ask me for it, I will give it to you. And
really?
Yeah, looking back at it, that was awful, but they didn't know what to do. So I think that basic guidance really helped
from the speech language therapist. Yeah.
So because they, immediately were told what to do and what not to do. Unfortunately, that was coming at the end of the nursery term. So it was I think May or so when the speech and language became involved at nursery, and we were pretty much breaking for summer. But that same speech and language therapist then went to the primary school when she started reception and explained to the school, that she had selective mutism, and again gave them some general guidance. The only problem there was that, the speech and language therapist would transition and would change every 3 or 4 months, and
Oh,
also speech and language therapists, even though they were allocated the case, to say so, they were not present at the school, or they didn't really put any intervention plan in place. It was more like, okay, yes, I've been allocated this case, this is the school, this is what you should do and not do, but bye, see you in 6 months.
Right, okay. So there's no continuity.
No,
intervention.
No,
right.
There's no intervention really. There's, I guess, it's a lack of resources, or a lack of time.
Sure.
They just go from one case to another,
Right,
and
sure.
around the schools, and that's about it. So it felt a little bit like, okay, we got there, we got assessed, we got diagnosed, we know what it is, but what do we do now?
Sure. Okay, that's really useful to share that. Thank you. So what did you find helpful in the early stages?
I think in the early stages, I found obviously getting professional advice was very helpful. I think coming across Esmira was very helpful, finding out that there was an association out there that was, supporting families and children with selective mutism. And I remember, getting involved in the Facebook group and reading lots of the material and comments, and started having dialogues with other parents and even Esmira staff themselves. So attending the conference, all of that was super helpful.
So meeting other parents and professionals, or
Yes, yeah, definitely.
talking to people who understand.
Yeah, talking to people who were going through the same, talking to people who have gone through the same, talking to people who knew about it, because it's not that well known. I remember reading and coming across Maggie Johnson and her selective mutism manual that was like, okay, it's so all the knowledge, so like gaining that knowledge was very helpful.
Sure.
I think what was quite helpful as well was to also understand that I probably needed some help myself as well, to go through this and to. I think I remember one of the conversations with one of the psychologists that I said to her, listen, I think the one who needs help is me too, so like almost like becoming aware that there was something that it just went beyond the professionals and the people outside to help you. It's just really something that you have to help your child yourself to overcome. That also makes you aware that you probably need also a little bit of support and help to overcome to overcoming yourself. So I think the network of professionals and
gaining the knowledge,
the association, the parents, that was all.
And that's a really interesting point you just made. So as a parent, you needed the guidance and support in order to help your child.
Totally, yes.
Sure, yeah.
It's not only about external people helping your child. It's like, okay, the person that really is going to help your child the most is yourself. So therefore, you need to first gain the knowledge, get the professional help, but also get help yourself to be sort of like
able
and empowered to
help your child.
To help your child.
Right, interesting, thank you. So those are all the things that you found helpful in those early stages. What were the challenges that you faced as a mum in the beginning stages in terms of accessing help for your child?
Okay, so I think generally there was this lack of knowledge of what really selective mutism is. I remember, even teachers and even the GP and people that you spoke to, they were like, oh yeah, selective mutism, yeah, I heard about it, yeah, we know. They didn't have a clue, or they didn't know how to actually help the child to overcome it. It was like, yeah, we know about it. And I remember the school saying, yeah, we know about it. We've been trained about it. So what are you going to do about it? And,
right. Okay.
And there's actually there's no action plan. There's no like, okay, we know about it, and this is how we go on about it.
So maybe theoretically they had heard of it.
So they heard of the term, and some people called it elective mutism, some other people call it selective mutism, and the theory was available.
What
but
do you
actually,
do?
it's like, okay, and now what do I do? You
Yeah,
know?
okay.
So I think there was a lack of, how do I put things in practice?
Yeah.
What do I do every day? I mean, I go tomorrow to school, so doesn't speak. What do I do?
Yeah, sure. And you mentioned that there were so many professionals involved, psychologists, paediatrician,
Yes.
speech language therapists and CAMs and all these people. So it seemed like you had quite a big network.
Yes, but there's no one taking the lead, or there's no one saying, okay, but this is the intervention plan that we're doing.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how many professors you have involved. Actually, the only thing that the child needs is someone who is spending time with them where they are unable to speak, who can help them to be able to speak. And it could be a teacher, it could be a teacher assistant, it could be a parent, it could be a friend. You know, you need someone to be present there
with the child, sure, of
with
course.
the child to actually start making things happen.
Of course, yeah.
And you didn't have that because there were people like external people who came in, treated it as a case. Yes, this is what the case is about.
But they were not hands-on, actually helping her to make steps forward with talking.
Yeah, and even the school. I mean, I remember so she started primary and she was in reception and was talking to the teacher. And the reaction of the school was very much at the beginning like, yes, we know about it. You know, we'll deal with that. Thank you very much, ma'am. Stay away. Pretty much, you know.
Right.
Or yes, we hear you, but you know.
We're going to deal with it.
We'll be fine. And I was like, yeah, but what about this? And what are you doing? And can I slide in? And they were like, not really. And
right.
And then you feel that, you know, the months go by and it's like nothing is happening and she's not improving and it's just like, but can I, you know, you become really impatient really. When you know that there is an issue for this school, it really isn't an issue because it's not disruptive. So, you know, it's just like give it time. But you know that every day counts and the more time that she spends not talking, the more difficult it's going to be for them to talk. So that becomes a little bit frustrating.
So with hindsight, what advice would have helped you in those early stages?
I think what it would have helped would have been a positive message from maybe a parent. That would have helped a lot, but even a positive message from anyone, you know, even the professionals involved. I think what I felt at the time was a little bit depressing, and it was very sad. It was almost like, oh, okay, the sad news is that your child has selective mutism, and it's like, oh my God. I wish I had come across someone who has said, you know what? Yes, it is what it is, and it's absolutely fine. It's transitional. You're going to overcome it, and it's going to be fine.
Exactly, yeah.
And I didn't get that from pretty much anyone.
Yeah, sure. And actually, yeah, I was just having a Skype session this morning with a family, and they had just found out that their child has selective mutism a month ago, and they were saying that they've spent the last month really researching about selective mutism, and they've said that it caused them to panic because all the information out there was quite scary
and negative, yeah.
And they really put a lot of fear into them. And my message to them in today's Skype session was selective mutism is a anxiety disorder, and it is, you know, we can absolutely help a child with selective mutism to make steps forward with talking. There is so much that can be done, so much that can be done, and it's not a you know, a neurological condition which somebody has that is you know, is fixed. It's something that we can work with. And of course, you know, again, for people who are watching this video, it can be a slow process. It absolutely can be a long road. And every child is in a different stage in their journey with selective mutism. But wherever they are now, there are those steps that we can take to help them. So it would have been nice if you had been reassured that it is, you know, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, ultimately.
Definitely.
Okay, great. So, of course, you mentioned your journey with finding these professionals, and that was towards the end of nursery.
Nursery started reception.
And then she started reception, and then we met each other in when she was in reception. Yeah, it was obviously at the Smile conference. So that was in. So when we met, where was she at with her?
Right.
What was the situation
right. So
then?
when we met, I think she had obviously been diagnosed by then. The speech and language therapist had been to the primary school and gave some guidance to the teachers, but then disappeared. Pretty much. I think CAMS may have already been involved because she had a couple of accidents whilst at the school and then became a bit disruptive for the teachers. So then the teacher decided that something needed to be done. So we got a referral to CAMS to try to help her overcome it was toileting issues at this stage. So, there were a few people involved. We also had a speech and language sort of like additional support at the school, and then eventually the Senko at the school as well. So there were people in place, but there was not an intervention plan in place. So I think by the time that I met you, because we had already had that referral to CAMS, the Senko in the school then decided that, we should all come together and then put a more practical...
because she still wasn't talking at all at school.
She was not talking at all. So when I met you, I just thought, well, there's someone external who could be fully dedicated to help my daughter in school by obviously working with her directly, but also by teaching and giving the school and the school staff techniques that could help my daughter to start being verbal.
So now we've discussed, the whole process of you discovering your child had selective mutism, the challenges that you faced in the early stages, what you would have liked to have known in those early stages, how you began to access help. So, tell us about the process of your child finding their voice. So, did she start talking in some situations first? Was it a sudden process or was it a gradual process?
I think it was definitely gradual. I think, you may remember better than I do, but I think how it happened is that she started being verbal with a few of her friends in school, perhaps through games. Then she started being verbal with the teacher assistant. Then eventually she started being verbal with the teacher, and then with other extended friends, and then more friends, and then grew from there. I think what happened in parallel with what it was happening in school is that she started becoming verbal with more people within a family and a group of friends, and she was starting being more verbal in different settings outside of home. So it's sort of like, it's all gradual, but it's sort of like builds up, and it happens in parallel. And I think what happens is that the more she manages to talk, then the more she
can
talks.
talk. Yeah,
it's just almost
building
like
momentum.
It definitely does.
Absolutely.
Build momentum. And I think I told you this, but I mean, for us, always going back to Spain and reuniting with families, it was a big challenge. She was not talking to my parents. She was not unable to talk to my mum. And of
course, they were talking Spanish, so that's an additional barrier.
So that's an additional barrier as well. But I remember trying her not to stop talking or not to become suddenly mute by coming up with either songs or games or silly things that would keep her talking, regardless of what language. We would probably just continue talking in English for a bit. And I remember being picked up from the airport by my mum, and then get into the car, and then I could just see her already started I was like, okay, well, shall we count 1 to 10, and let's count 1 to 10 in English, so then we can teach Granny how to count. And or just playing a song that I knew she knew, like the 10 Little Monkeys Jumping on the Bed. I mean, that was their song. And just getting her not to lose her voice in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think those little techniques really, really helped.
Yeah.
I think being silly, I think you need to be really silly with children like that, because they need to see you relax and they need to perceive that you are not anxious or worried or sad or angry at them for not talking. You sort of like need to almost
keep it playful,
keep it silly, keep it like quite, with a lot of informal, with sense of humor. I think it's really important to have that sense of humor.
100%. Yeah, whenever I'm working with children, it's always very very silly, and we're just having fun.
Exactly,
it's all about having fun.
And I think they love it because, obviously, child is different, but some of the traits that I can see in my own daughter is that, she tends to be very perfectionist, she tends to be very aware of what other people are seeing of her or are feeling about her, and she almost like is super sensitive as to how I react to certain situations. So, she was probably almost more worried, or she was as worried about her not talking than she was about how is my mum feeling about me not talking.
Right, even at that young age.
So she would be like, is my mum feeling anxious? Am I letting her down?
Right.
So you almost have to like make a joke about
just keep things playful. Because I 100% think that children are so intuitive, and so, especially children with selective mutism, they're super sensitive and very aware, more so than a child without selective mutism, I feel. So that's why we have to keep things playful and give the impression that everything is under control.
Yeah, and I think that sort of sensitivity can also play in your favor, because they tend to be children that that they are either quite artistic, or that they like either singing or dancing or drawing. Or just doing like manual things, art.
Yeah,
I think
creative. Yeah,
creative. They tend to be quite creative. So again, using that creativity or using that thing that the child likes works very well to be used as a bridge to interact with other people.
Yes, and
sometimes not necessarily being verbal. I remember my daughter; she loved Play-Doh. I carried Play-Doh in my bag for years. Because in every situation, whenever I knew that things were building up and she was being anxious, like, okay, get the Play-Doh out.
Yes.
It could be a restaurant, it could be a play date, it could be, again, having people around, just get the Play-Doh out, or just put that song on, or let's do this dance, or let's count to 10, or let's sing something.
It's always about figuring out what will unlock her voice. Yeah. And with your daughter and other children, every child's of course different, and everyone has their own thing that unlocks their voice. I've got the boy I worked with, it was like Pokemon, and something that you can that works for them. And if something works, replicate it every single time.
And use it and like maximize it, exploit it. I remember
because of repetition, and they become really comfortable with that, and the predictability. It's not boring for them. It's safe.
It is safe. It's almost like it's that sort of like it's carrying your night lamp with you. It's just like it gives them the safety. I remember I noticed it very early days. She was great, and she could even shout if she was on a trampoline. So trampoline or jumping was again another way to just break that anxiety.
Yeah, I remember when I first started going into school. So I used to go into school every week. It was for half a day, once a week. And when I first arrived, she didn't talk to anybody at school, as we know. And I just remember taking part in lots of play with her. She was only in reception, so there was lots of physical play. And we started with making sounds, lots of silliness, and making sounds through like rolled up pieces of paper, doing lots of role plays. I remember playing with her and the children in the outdoor area, pretending to make ice creams.
Yes.
So we'd have these cones, like that they play with, and we were going and then she started. I think that was the first sound she made was and then from there I just built on that, and then eventually she started to answer me in one word replies, and I was the first person she spoke to at school.
I think so, it was.
And then from there, I remember I spent time with her in class, but then I also spent time with her away from the other children, and just the two of us building that talking relationship. And once she was really comfortable with me, I then, like you said, the next goal was children. So we brought in a couple of children to those games, and she started to talk to me in front of those children. And that was so important, because I remember the first time I went into school, into the reception, the children told me straight away, she doesn't talk. I think they even said she can't talk.
She can't talk, yeah.
So it was just changing their idea about her, that she can talk. And for them to hear her talking to me was quite significant. And I think for her to see that, she's talking in front of them was a big deal.
Yeah. And I think the she can talk is an obvious one. And I think it's quite an important one as a parent to know how to face, because you obviously are going to face that moment when, either other children in school or friends will at some point say, well, but she can't talk, or I don't want to play with her because she cannot talk. In my case, what I think is important is at some point as a parent, and obviously it will depend on the age and what stage in her development the child is, but I think you need to acknowledge with your child in a certain way that something, that I'm not talking, and almost like reassure them that, well, we know that this is at the moment is a little bit of a problem, or that you're scared of talking, but, do not worry, because, that happened to me as well when I was a child, or it happened to so when they're a child. And, we can get through this, and there will be little things that we will do, and you will talk eventually. And when all the children say she can't talk, whether it is you as a parent who is there at that time, or whether it's the teacher, I think it's important to address those children who are saying she can't talk, and the answer should always be she does talk, and she does talk a lot at home. At the moment, when she's here, she finds it quite difficult, but, little by little she will. And we can all help her just by being nice, and perhaps we can just play something that doesn't need to talk to start with, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's almost like, again, normalize it in front of the child, and also normalize it in front of other children, because children will obviously say she cannot talk, and you should never tell off the other children for just acknowledging that someone is not talking, because it is true. So instead of hiding or avoiding it, it's just like, yes, it doesn't. I mean, that's true. Yeah, I mean, we haven't had it yet.
And that's okay.
But actually, she does a lot at home, and it is okay, because you know what? She will eventually.
She will.
And if you could even take that opportunity to compare it with something else, just use an anomaly of, okay, some people are scared of talking, but some people are scared of spiders. So do you remember, or when, this friend was very scared of this cat and couldn't really get close to that cat, and now look, she's got a cat herself. Do you know how we did it? Well, actually, we started just like approaching the cat little by little, or, we just give her a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then eventually, that's exactly what happens with this child, and that's why, she's yet not talking, but she will.
Yeah, great. And that's also why I wrote the Eliza book, I've got it here, wrote this book so that children can actually read about a child who also doesn't talk, and that's okay, and she does make steps forward. And there's also an example, her friend Anna, who's scared of dogs, and just like the example that you've just given, you can talk about, she's scared of dogs and how she overcomes it in small steps, and it's like you say, just normalizing it and not making it a taboo.
No, not making it a taboo.
It shouldn't be something that we should be ashamed of. Yeah. It's just something that the child is finding difficult now, and that's okay. Lots of things are difficult, and we can work with it step by step.
Yeah, I think the more that you can normalize it, the better, and the earlier that you can normalize it, I think also the better. And if you can, even with your own experience, just explain to the child that we are all scared of something.
If you don't mind sharing, do you think that your child has now overcome selective mutism, or do you think selective mutism still has an impact on her life today? So now she's 8 years old. She was 4 when she was non-verbal at school and in all of these different situations, and now she's 8 years old. Yes. So do you think she's now overcome selective mutism, or is selective mutism still a big part of her life?
I think I could say that she has overcome selective mutism. I think she's now able to speak in every setting with pretty much anybody. She's definitely verbal at school. She's able to order and answer questions to strangers, whether it is buying a pair of shoes or being in a restaurant. Obviously, what I would say is that perhaps the anxiety underlying or what it may have caused the selective mutism to develop is still there, and I think that would be a trait of her personality. And I think anxiety, or the way that she's in terms of being sensitive about what other people may think or know, like in being put on a spot or being quite perfectionist, that's who she is. But having said that, I think the fact that she's from a very early age been able to cope with anxiety and find a way to overcome such a challenge, I think that would probably help her to cope with anxiety and stress for the rest of her life. So I think, if anything, overcoming selective mutism has made her very resilient, and the sense of I had a big challenge once and I was able to overcome it. I'm brave enough to just get over anything that life throws at me.
That's incredible, and that's such a positive message for people who are watching this to hear, because you're actually saying that in hindsight, her having selective mutism has made her a stronger and more resilient person, which will ultimately help her in life, because she's overcome this big challenge so early on. And I know that you actually have these conversations with her about, I remember when you found it hard to talk at school, and you overcame, now you can. Yeah. And she actually sees it as you talk about it in a really you normalise it a lot with her, and she sees it as an achievement.
It's an achievement in her life.
In terms of has she overcome selective mutism, I remember how, at the beginning, of course, she was completely non-verbal at school. Then she started talking to me at school. Then we built on that, we introduced children. And then when she went into year 1, we introduced the first school-based adult. We faded in her class TA at the time, her teaching assistant, and she started talking to them, and then her teacher. And we were always, and then building on the first talking partners, but then the different situations. So firstly in just one-to-one, then in front of a small group, then register, and then playground, and just building, until eventually she went into year 2, and then we faded in her year 2 teacher. And it gets to a point where she's had so many positive talking experiences that she doesn't need such support anymore. She's actually built this resilience that I can do it. I've done this already. It's no longer something I can't do. Yeah. It's something she can do, because she now talks. She now answers the register. So I didn't even fade in her year 3 teacher. She just spoke to her without my help. And now, and now of course I don't go into school anymore. She doesn't need me. Because she is completely verbal in all situations at school.
And I think it just gets to the point that they manage to develop their own coping mechanisms in a way, whether it is transitioning to a new teacher or being introduced to new friends or being in a situation where we're probably having like friends around or new people around. And I sometimes say that even if I notice that she may be feeling a little bit tense, or her anxiety may be building up, she's always like having these coping mechanisms of whether using the same type of words or answering. She's able not to be mute. It may be occasions that she's not initiating a speech, or she's not freely talking straight away, but she doesn't go mute. She almost has like her own ways not to be mute, whether it could be answering with good, or I don't know, or yes, or no, but she just like gets through it.
Right, she's able to get through it and be able to cope. Even so, she's no longer becoming mute in situations. She might be, if she's a bit anxious, she might become a little bit quieter.
Yeah.
But she's still able to use her voice.
Yes.
So
she's able just to, at least cope with it.
And her use of her voice is not impacting her ability to access activities or situations. Wow, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your whole journey that you've gone through, from having a child with selective mutism who was completely non-verbal at school and in all these situations of extended family, to now being able to talk across these situations. So she was then 4 when your journey with selective mutism started, and now she's 8 and she's able to use her voice across situations. So now that you've experienced this whole journey from those very early stages when your child was non-verbal to now using her voice, what advice would you give to parents who currently have a child with selective mutism?
Well, it's a difficult situation because obviously, each child and individual is different. But if I could say anything, it would be stay positive. You will have to go through the journey yourself, especially at the beginning. Do all the research that you have to do, gain the knowledge, understand what selective mutism is, reach out to professionals, reach out to SMERA. Stay positive. I think that would be my number one. Don't feel too sad or depressed about it. This is something that, it can be overcome, and, your child will just go through it. And then just be silly, keep that sense of humor all the time, and just try to normalize it as much as you can with your child. I was just about to say, normalizing seems to be a theme that we've has come up quite a lot during this discussion. Just normalizing it for yourself and also for your child, and not to be ashamed of it. It's not something to be ashamed of. No,
it's just something we're currently experiencing. That's okay. And let's just work through it together. And there's so much that can be done to help a child with selective mutism.
Yes. So just stay focused, and then just put things in practice.
Keep moving forward.
Keep moving forward. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your journey of having a child with selective mutism.
Pleasure.
I'm sure this would be really useful for parents.
I hope so. I really hope so. I think hearing other parents and reaching out to other parents is part of the process, and it's quite an important one.
Yeah, of course.
Not feeling lonely or feeling that you're the only case.
Exactly, because parents often do feel very alone in this situation. So to realise that there are other parents who are out there who are going through the same things as you, and it can be a very long process, and there are ups and downs along the way, but we just always want to be, working towards the next step and being guided by the child and moving forward, essentially. So thank you so much for sharing. There's been so much wisdom that you've shared today and really useful information.
Thank you.
Of course, I just want to reiterate that this is Maria's personal experience of having a child with selective mutism. Every situation, family, child is unique. So some of what Maria has shared today may have resonated with you. Other parts may have been less relevant to your situation. So please take what is relevant and leave what isn't, because every situation is unique. So thank you so much for watching this video. Before you go, just a reminder that I have a Facebook page called Confident Children Selective Mutism Therapy, where I regularly share resources, videos like this one and others, articles and everything selective mutism. So please go over to Confident Children Selective Mutism Therapy and like that page. And also please subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you receive notifications in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.